I don't know if you guys saw, but Ukraine sunk another Russian warship. This is a troop carrier. Well, this is a transport ship, so this could be used to transport tanks up to, I think, 300 soldiers, but these have mostly been used to shuttle supplies. And when this boat was hit, being part of the Black Sea Fleet, it was shuttling supplies to Crimea, and it gave a big explosion. Assumingly, it was carrying shells, and the report indicates that, at least the Ukrainians report indicate, that they killed most of the crew. The Russians say otherwise, but I'll leave that up to you guys to decide. Let's check out the footage. This is another hit on the Black Sea Fleet, and this hit is kind of historic for a reason that's a little funny, even though, of course, death and war, it's not funny, but what this means is very funny, and I'll explain that in a moment. A nation without a navy.
Revenge is a must. Boy want heads get buried in dust. 6 foot deep and I live a boy on that dog and I mean.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Revenge is a must. I'm sorry. That hit me like a truck. Revenge is a must. God, man, the Ukrainians love doing the mixtapes with these war videos. To be clear, this is from the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. This is Budinov's group. I'm just imagining this guy approving this music. 1 second. This guy approving this music. This guy here. This guy, yeah. What's that? Let me hear the music again.
That cost. Payback time, I show no remorse. On my guy, cause I like go boss. Bad man, them they coming like Judas. Want see me on the nail and cross. Everybody listen. Time on the way, they hot tick.
Okay, let's turn off the music. So, this strike on this ship, these are important for the defense of Crimea. If Crimea was to ever be put under siege, these ships would be employed as being part of the Russian Black Sea Fleet to transport troops, supplies, and other sorts of things. And this type of transport ship, has already been destroyed by the Ukrainians before. By the way, the destruction of the ship, there's the explosion. The destruction of this ship did cause it to capsize. So this ship is gone. There's no repairing the ship. The ship's gone. It's worth $300 million and went to the bottom of the Black Sea. These ships are important because if the Ukrainians ever successfully were able to destroy the land bridge that the Russians have established to Crimea, then and destroy the Crimean bridge, either with a Taurus missile or some sort of other type of weapon after a successful capture of the land bridge, then these ships would be employed in order to support Crimea during the impending siege. And if all of these ships are destroyed, with multiple of them already having been destroyed by the Ukrainians using these very cheap Sea Baby suicide drones, I mean, this was only like 4 kilometers off the coastline off the coastline. They were pretty far out there. These suicide drones from the Russian coastline. From the occupied coastline. This is pretty devastating for those people who are trying to plan for a siege scenario. And if they destroy another one, I mean, or any more, it's already pretty bad, but there's a lot of war left and a lot of sea babies left. But before I try to speculate about anything else about the future or exactly the immediate impacts on logistics, I want to show you guys something. This is the list of now destroyed Russian ships in the Russian Black Sea Fleet. Now, the Russian Black Sea Fleet is interesting because in order to access the Russian Black Sea Fleet here, or get more ships into it, you need to pass through Turkish territory, because the Turks control the strait that enters into the Black Sea, and the Turks have treaties governing which ships can enter. And during wartime, warring parties cannot transport new ships into the area. This doesn't just affect the Russians, by the way. This affects the Ukrainians too. When the British tried to transport minesweeper ships that were supposed to assist the Ukrainians in the corridor that they've established on the Romanian coastline to help them transport tons of grains, which is one of the big successes that has not been covered in the Western press nearly as much as it should be. They've nearly reached pre-war levels of grain exports using this grain corridor, literally breaking the Russian siege, the Russian blockade with sea baby drones with no fleet. And all the Russians can do is drop mines into the pathway, trying to slow it down and increase the insurance costs. The same effect that the Houthis are having on the Red Sea and the insurance companies that insure that the ships that go through that passageway. Point is, though, they've been able to establish a good grain corridor, even if the insurance premiums are probably not pretty. Transporting by water is 10 times cheaper than transporting by rail. And that's why they wanted a grain corridor for the farmers in Ukraine, which are really suffering right now, already from a ton of other issues with tons of TM62 tank mines in their fields. I was visiting mining crews trying to talk to these farmers. They just don't have the material to expend on it right now. So a lot of farmers are doing it by themselves. It's a huge hassle. Point is, they've been able to establish that grain corridor by cucking the fleet with the Sea Baby drones. And as you can see here, they've destroyed a lot of ships. They destroyed the flagship, the Moskva, early on in the war. Not all of these were taken out by suicide drones. Some of them were taken out by rockets. Like, I know the Moskva was not taken out by Sea Babies. The Sea Babies were developed later. The Moskva was taken out by missiles. But they've taken out more than 25, like this is like 25% of the fleet. This is a lot of the fleet that they've taken out. And remember, the Russians cannot replenish this fleet. They cannot bring in new ships. So even if the Russians were to build new ships, they'd have to build the ships literally on the coastline of the Black Sea. So that's just another $350 million ship gone. I saw some cope of some people saying, well, you know, that's just another expense gone or anything. If those sailors are dead and that's a $350 million ship at the bottom of the ocean, I don't care what type of cope you try to say, that is a bad loss for the Russians. And every time they lose one of these ships, they constrain the movement of their navy a little bit more, because these are not ships that can be easily replaced due to the treaties that they have with Turkey restricting the travel of ships through the Bosphorus Strait. Point is, the Russian army is facing a shortage of ships in the Black Sea that's only going to get worse and worse and worse as time goes on. And if they keep losing these transport ships, it's only going to make a future siege of Crimea only that more critical, and the Russians that more desperate to avoid that scenario. Also, I wanted to talk about this tweet by Matt Wallace, because, you know, it's just naval related as well. So I wanted to comment on it. So Matt Wallace posted this video. You know what? Maybe we can even go find it. It's on my Twitter. So we'll look at it myself. Let's go down there. Here it is. Anyone who believes Ukraine can beat Russia is clinically insane. So my immediate reaction to this was just thinking, America and Vietnam, America and Afghanistan, the Soviet Union and Afghanistan. I mean, there's many wars where someone had big navy, but other factors like perseverance, local animosity, geography, and all these other features dedicated to the Russians or Americans or these overwhelming, more powerful powers just not winning these wars. I mean, like these ships are all cool, but it didn't help them very much during the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. I mean, if you look at the Afghan population, like they demolished Afghanistan with bombing, just full carpet bombing, millions injured and dead, millions more fleeing the country. You see the Afghan population just dip, and they still lost. Even when they tried to implement all that overwhelming power, they still lost the war. And so just showing these ships doesn't necessarily mean anything, especially since we just did a segment about how like 25% of the Russian Black Sea Fleet has been sunk by a combination of suicide drones and rocket tubes, right? So I didn't like this video up front. Then this added context got added. Of the 5 large surface vessels shown in this video, 4 have been sunk. The Moskva, along with 3 Rapucha class landing ships. That includes the ship we just saw blow up. Out of all the ships to use, how embarrassing. Oh my gosh. And then look at his responses, and each response gets more added context to all the sheep celebrating this ratio. I mean, remember, over 500,000 humans have been killed in this war already, and hundreds of thousands more will die if it doesn't end. These are men with families who need them, or young men whose genetic lines are erased from the world. End the war. This is very nice, like steel clapping, like pacifism. None of this shows a pathway to peace or what the Ukrainians would accept at the negotiating table, what the Russians accept at the negotiating table. I'm sure it feels good. I'm sure this feels very good. But again, the Russians invaded. The Ukrainians defend themselves. The war can end at any time if the Russians leave. But also, no serious offer of peace as of right now do we know has been offered. No serious offer has been offered to the Ukrainians, which the Americans say that the Russians should be negotiating with, which makes sense because they're the country they invaded and they have the biggest interest in what Ukraine looks like after, because they're the people that's supposed to be serving, the residents who live there. But he's not even like, he just got trolled because like you can see clearly that the stuff he's showing in his videos, like, oh, how do you think you can beat this? It got beaten. And so instead he's just like, end the war. Anyway, he still gets added context. Denying aid to Ukraine will not end the war. Ukrainians are determined to keep defending their country. And then it shows a poll that shows that 74% of Ukrainians want to keep fighting. There's also a Kiev Institute of Sociology poll that shows 66% of Ukrainians want to keep fighting even if Western support ends. Now, maybe the situation would change as the conditions on the ground change to match that reality, but it's still pretty overwhelming. Obviously, Putin is more to blame than anyone else, but also the Ukraine government provoked Russia in many serious ways and refused to negotiate on almost anything. What does that mean? In fact, the very start, before the war even started, the Ukrainians said, let's negotiate. When Euromaidan happened and Yanukovych fled, the new interim government immediately told the Russians, we are willing to negotiate vis-a-vis Crimea. Not negotiate, hey, you want all of Crimea, but negotiate the future of the naval base so the Russians could keep their naval interests in the region, because they knew that in the amount of instability they were in and the amount the Russians cared about the naval base, that they'd be willing to make that offer. Then the Russians invaded and took over all of Crimea. So I don't, like, what do you mean, refuse to give up or negotiate anything? They negotiated many times. Minsk 1, Minsk 2, there were over 200 rounds of negotiation, even 20 negotiated ceasefires. Both are responsible. Yawn. An end to the war needs to be negotiated immediately. No more funding a futile war. If you're a defender and you continue to defend and the Russia continues to attack and you can succeed in holding them back, then that's not a futile war. You could say that there might be, if there are certain goals that are inachievable, you could say those things are futile, but it's not a futile war for the defender. The defender merely has to defend. Now, the Ukrainians, if they want to take back land, they're going to have to do more, but that's the defender's goal, is to defend. Ukraine never did anything to Russia, never provoked them. Damn, these community notes are, these are vicious NAFO community notes, 100%. Negotiations are useless. Dog, how did these get approved? How did these notes get approved? They're being said like it's a science. Oh my God. Ukraine never did anything to Russia, never provoked them. Negotiations are useless. Putin has stated he won't stop until his goals are achieved. Furthermore, Putin has broken half a dozen agreements by invading Ukraine. Who says he will keep his word this time? That's true. Not only the Budapest Memorandum, but I think like what it was the brother. I think it was the Brother Nations Agreement, or it was a friendship agreement. Then there was, of course, the from the bridge crisis. They made another agreement. There's so many different agreements. Yeah, true. Community notes went out of their way to note every single part of this thread. No provocation at all, huh? What about cutting off the water and economic battle? I'm sorry, they take over Crimea, and the Ukrainians cut off the water to the place you just annexed, and that's like how does that justify the annexation? That's like Russians invade Ukraine, Ukrainians shoot back, and then Russians say, oh, well, they're shooting at us, we had to invade. And the economic battle. What does it mean, economic battles? The fact that they wanted to join the association agreement, that's their business. Why? What? Are Ukrainians just inherently like subservient to the Russians? This Matt Walsh guy is he's not the brightest bulb. If Russia wants to take over more, why aren't they trying way harder in Ukraine? They are trying horribly hard. Matt Wallace, you pussy. You undeniable pussy. I will take you to Chasiv Yar tomorrow. You send me the DM. I will get your ass on a plane. We will go there together, and I'll have you sit in one of those basements and listen to the rumble. I will do that for you to give you a more fulfilling experience on what the war is like, so I can show you that the Russians are very much fucking trying. It's that they can't. It's never, oh, the Ukrainians defended themselves. The Ukrainians fought and they beat them back. It's always, oh, well, the Russians must have been holding back. Oh, it's never, the Russians just lost. The Russians just couldn't do it. The Russians are not superhuman. They bleed just like the rest of us, as we've seen a lot in Ukraine. Look at this community note. Community notes isn't a specific person or group. It's a crowdsource feature allowing the broader community to contribute insights and context of tweets, emphasizing collective participation over individual input. The algorithm behind it is publicly available. Adding another comment to this thread just to see if they can find some way to community note it too. Can we? Can we just community note it and call them? I'm sorry. Okay, I'm done. I'm done picking on Matt Wallace. But come on, man. Come on, man. Come on, man.